Coming up next on The Crack Between the Worlds. It wasn't my path. And I could feel something shifting inside of me. My whole being deciding I needed to do something different. I was watching a nature show the other day, and they were talking about dragonflies. Did you know they were born in water? They just stay underwater as nymphs for a long time. Their insides start to change, and they start becoming something else inside. And they just have to crawl out of the water, and the skin sheds and they become a dragonfly. Mm-hmm. And the narrator said, can you imagine all of a sudden, after being in the water your whole life and all the stuff going on inside of you, and then you find yourself climbing out of the water? They must be thinking like, what am I doing? Oh my God, what am I doing? Right? And I'm thinking, no, that's not what they're saying. They're saying, this is my destiny. I have to do this. Yeah. I can't not do this. Mm-hmm. So that was my experience. Welcome, everyone. This is The Crack Between the Worlds, and I'm Mark Wald. And today I'm going to try to answer the question, who is this guy? So I have a partner in time today that I want to introduce. She is a budding artist and writer, and she's also my beloved daughter. Aja, welcome to The Crack Between the Worlds.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so I think that one of the reasons I wanted to do this with you is because there's a lot of stuff I'm going to talk about today that I don't think we've ever really talked about. I don't think I've shared my personal process around how I got here and what I've been doing. So I thought it'd be fun to have that conversation with you and just sort of bounce things off. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
I want to just start by telling everybody, and this is something you already do know, I've shared this with you, that I started out as a pretty radical, rebellious young man. I was a problem child and made a lot of mistakes. I've had drug addiction issues. I wouldn't say that I was always a very good person. Mm-hmm. So although during that whole time period, I was always interested in, I was born and raised a Christian. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how long I really took Christianity incredibly seriously, not because there isn't really good teachings in there, but because I don't think it was taught in a way or presented in a way. I was learning in Sunday school and stuff like that about Jesus and God and stuff, and it wasn't really spiritual. So there's more I could say about that, but it was really helpful. And I just kept going. I was always interested in spirituality. Got in touch with Krishnamurti's work, Yogananda's work. I know you know some of this, but
they don't.
Yeah. And initially, I think I was on a path towards finding God. Okay. And it shifted.
Big journey.
Yeah. And it shifted into finding enlightenment, which is, what the ego wants to do. So, the ego wants to become enlightened. And I would say that it then really dove into a more spiritual journey, although I don't know I really like that word with all the meanings that are attached to it. Now I'm on a journey of consciousness and awakening. So that's sort of the journey that I went on, and some of the ways that I dove into it. I've also studied, I've read a lot of other, I read the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, I read some of the Quran, I read some of the Book of Mormon. Seriously, I had some friends that were Mormon when I was a businessman.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then when I lived in Japan, I was reading. I didn't study with a Zen Buddhist monk, but I was reading and studying Zen and Buddhism there because there was so much accessible. Yeah. And in that country, it's so easy to feel. Everything comes from Zen. Everything, the samurai, the tea ceremonies, the flower, all of that is Zen-based.
Yeah.
So. But anyway.
All of the Shinto shrines and everything everywhere.
Yeah. So is there any questions you have about that part of my past that you want to ask?
I think I would love to know if there was a moment that you can think of where you kind of switched off of studying about Jesus and digging into that, and what led you? Was there a defining moment? Was there a book that you read? Was there, was it just you got fed up with something, or was it just kind of a gradual, slow?
It was pretty gradual. I mean, reading the Bhagavad Gita and some of the Hindu tradition speaks to, I mean, they were talking about energy and everything made up of energy and vibration, and which is what we know it is now, thousands of years ago. So, but I think it was pretty gradual. I will jump ahead a little bit and say the book that really grabbed me. So first I want to say, when I was in my mid-20s, I went back to school. So I decided not to be a drug addict. So I made a transition, went back to school and studied international business marketing and Japanese. And that's something also that you've become interested in, the Japanese language.
Yeah. Language in general.
Yeah. So that really helped me take a leap into another world. I was very good at learning Japanese. I spent a lot of time with it. I went to Japan, went to university for a year there. What an amazing experience that was. And I came back and was doing business here for a while. And it wasn't my path. It just wasn't my path. And I could feel something shifting inside of me. I could feel my whole being deciding I needed to do something different.
Yeah.
And so I kept reading all these other books. I got deeper into Yogananda, and I went into, New Renaissance bookstore in downtown. It was the bookstore for that kind of stuff. And this book, it didn't literally fall into my lap, but it was wasn't where it was supposed to be. I just kind of looked at it, and it was called Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan. And I opened it up, and it was a manual for doing energy healing. And I was like, what is this? And I'm looking at it, and it was like an interesting book. So I bought it, took it home, and I read it in it was a big, thick manual. I read it in 2 days. So Barbara Brennan taught a course, a 4-year training program. You go for 5 weeks every year, 5 individual weeks, and it's in New York. And it's ridiculous that I think I would do something like this, talk about an about face.
Yeah.
But I read this book, and I'm so I can't not call the school. So I called them, and I say, I had to call you. I don't know why. And the girl on the other end laughed and said, well, what's up? And I said, well, I read the book, and I'm just like, what is this? This school that you guys have? And she said, oh, if you really want to know, where do you live? And I said, Portland, Oregon. She said, well, Barbara's going to be doing a workshop in Seattle next month. So I said, great, sign me up. So I signed up, and I'm going to go up and see Barbara Brennan speak. I don't know if I told you this story, but I'm driving up to Seattle by myself to go to this thing, and I'm really excited, and I'm just bubbling. I have no idea why. I'm just completely, I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, elated.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, she's probably going to do a demo healing, and maybe she'll do one on me. Right? And I'm just thinking about how cool that would be. And I imagine, because she did a lot of table work, that she'd have a table, I'd lie down, and she'd do this energy work and get me all healed. So it doesn't quite work like that.
No.
But, so I get there, and there's a huge auditorium in a hotel, and there's 350 people there. And she gives a lecture, and she talks for an hour or so, and then she says, by the way, later on, I'm going to do a demo healing, but don't raise your hand. I'm going to know who that person's going to be. And so then she can continue talking for a while. And after about another 30 or 40 minutes, she said, are there any questions? So a person over there asked a question. I'm sitting and I go, oh, I have a question. So I raised my hand after that person was done. And she goes, yes. And I said, how is it that I feel like my father was an incredibly busy man, and I don't feel like he was a significant in terms of raising me. He was a good dad, but why am I so much like him? And she goes, oh, would you like to come up for a healing? Honestly, it makes me want to cry
Yeah.
because it was such a profound experience. I get up there in front of 350 mostly women, because healing, how many men go to a healing thing?
Yeah.
Back then, this is
In the 90s.
This is in the 90s. And she did like a half-hour healing energy work on me, and I was completely like,
Yeah.
everything was just gone. It was mind-blowing. I get down from the stage. She sort of closes the ceremony. I'm off to the side with a couple of the people that work for her, calming me and grounding me, and because I'm just like coming back to earth.
Yeah.
And sorry.
It's okay.
It was such a profound experience. And people came up afterwards and they were trying to keep them from, because everybody wanted to go, what was that like? What was that like?
Oh, yeah. And then that's really.
And all I could say was, I'm going to this school, And I was in tears then too. It was so profound. So then I went to this school, and I want to share something with you. This is also true with what's happening to me now. I was watching a nature show the other day, and they were talking about dragonflies and how aerodynamically they are one of the best flying creatures on the planet. They can go back and forth, and they're just like unbelievably agile in the air. Did you know they were born in water?
Yeah.
And they were nymphs for most of their life?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they just stay underwater as nymphs for a long time. And so I was watching this nature show, and they were talking about this, and they had a narrator telling the story and how their insides start to change, and they start becoming something else inside. And the narrator said at some point they like a gene flips or something happens, and they just have to crawl out of the water. They just grab a blade of grass or a stalk of something, and they climb out, and they out in the middle of the sun and everything, and until they dry and the skin sheds and they become a dragonfly. And the narrator said, can you imagine all of a sudden, after being in the water your whole life and all the stuff going on inside of you, and then you find yourself climbing out of the water? They must be thinking like, what am I doing? Oh my God, what am I doing? Right? And I'm thinking, no, that's not what they're saying. They're saying, this is my destiny. I have to do this.
Yeah.
I can't not do this. So that was my experience.
Yeah.
I was climbing out on this blade of grass going, fuck it, I'm going.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. I'm going to pause and see if you have any questions. I'm talking a lot, so just want to check in.
I don't think I have any immediate questions. I have like thoughts, but they're not like direct questions.
Do you want to share anything?
I was just thinking about, so I don't know why, but something about that metaphor made me think of braiding sweetgrass. And
the book.
Yeah. In one of the chapters, Kimmerer talks about she's like mucking out a pond on her property for her daughters because when they bought their house, they moved from like Kansas or something to New York. And she bought, like a farmhouse with like maple trees and there's like a pond and all of this. And the girls wanted a swimming pond. So she's got to muck out the pond and like clean it up and all of this stuff because she had a realization where like one of the ducks was like walking on it and you should not be able to walk on the pond. But she says,
so Jesus duck.
Exactly. It turns out Jesus was just walking on like moss and things.
Right.
There was nothing. It's just algae. It was just a lot of algae. But she says, I worked on the pond and the pond worked on me because it made her at that time of like thinking and processing and all of these concessions she has to make. And there's this theme of like reciprocity of pulling from the pond, and then that algae, that very nutrient dense algae, instead of feeding back into the system to create more algae and more issues in the pond, she's putting in the compost to feed her garden and whatnot. But that I worked on the pond and the pond worked on me is kind of made me think of that for something. It just came to mind.
Makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. It's a great book.
It is.
So yeah, for me, coming from a place of darkness and not being a very good person, to go through these long journeys of transformation underwater,
Yeah.
and this whole thing changing inside of me, and all of a sudden I'm going from being a sort of a criminal, drug addict, wild, crazy person to a business person to, I'm going to study energy work and healing.
Yeah.
And so that was my crawling out of the water onto.
Do you think it was kind of like you waking up in stages?
I do. Yeah. And I don't know that I would have known that. Certainly, to be honest, my ego was involved in everything I was doing. Right. I mean, my ego was thinking, I'm sure if I was a healer, then I'd be special.
Oh, yeah.
All of that stuff is all happening too.
Mm-hmm.
But yes. So the school by this time has like 800 students in it. Mm-hmm. They have teachers who come from all over the world to teach there. So being there for those weeks was
magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We went there to learn how to see energy. Do you see energy?
I don't think so. I think I like feel things, but I don't think that I see energy. In a lot of like fantasy and stuff, they'll be like, adults can't see X, Y, or Z.
Right.
Adults can't see fairies. Adults can't see magic. Adults, whatever. I think there's there's so many different. It's so common in especially like young adult or like middle reader fantasy chapter books or series. Yeah, but like the kids can see whatever and adults can't, and I think that kind of feeds into that. You disconnect. In one of my classes this past term, we were talking about de-indigenization, and I think that and how that removes self from nature. And that I think also in Braiding Sweetgrass, Kimmer talks about that it's very childlike to view a tree as a person. There's a childlike innocence to that, to equate a tree and a person a little bit. And as we get older, we're socialized to view nature as separate from ourselves. And I think in that separation, that's probably a similar like situation to the separation of self from the other world, from seeing energies, from things like that. You're socialized to think that doesn't exist or it's not real. Or
after a while, you just think the word tree is tree.
Yeah.
Instead of you say that's a tree and you don't even connect.
Well, and then that's tied to language too, because English is very noun based. A tree is a thing,
right?
Whereas in some other languages, it's a living. It's alive. You would refer to it the same way you would a person.
Yeah. So you're like me. I'm kinesthetic. So they call it high sense perception. Okay. And visual is one, but all 5 of your senses. I got to a point where I could smell energy. Okay. And I could see energy to some degree. And I remember seeing some pretty wild stuff during sessions at the Brennan School.
But that doesn't come as naturally to you.
No, kinesthetic is definitely the thing for me, just like you. When people are feeling things, if I'm tuned in and working,
you'll feel it like in your body.
Feel it, yeah. So that has really informed what I do now a lot. And that school was incredibly profound for me. And actually, I was going to say one more thing. While I was there, one of the teachers, her name was Patricia White Buffalo. She is a Native American shaman and also a teacher at the school. And she also studied Brennan, and she also studied core energetics, which we're going to talk about later. Yeah. And she was like, I don't know, she's like short, 5'1" or 2 or something. And she's powerful, like really powerful. I can cry again.
That's okay.
She was one of my teachers in the process. And she changed my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, she really directed me towards shamanism, towards indigenous work. It was life-changing for me. And that also has a huge impact on the work that I do now. So, and I'm going to talk about this stuff in future conversations here. I'm hoping actually that White Buffalo is going to be coming and joining me here. So I'll leave that there. Brendan was amazing. And during the training, I had to do therapy. It was a requirement. And I didn't think I needed therapy.
Everyone needs therapy.
Everybody.
Even if you think you're fine, you need therapy.
Yeah. It's kind of true.
Look that into camera. You need therapy.
So
you should know about this too.
No, this is great. Thank you. Bringing some levity to this room.
Yeah. With my Pedro Pascal memes. Him on Hot Ones.
Mm-hmm. I chose a core energetics therapist here in town, and core energetics and Barbara Brennan are related. One of the teachers of core energetics, Ken Goldberg, is also going to join us in this room at some point. So I'm going to have a conversation with him. We'll go into more detail about that.
Was he your therapist?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I was in core therapy, and this is body-centered. It's somatic work. Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying the show, please remember to like and subscribe. And if you have any ideas at all about the show, please leave them in the comments below. We'd love to hear about it. So thanks for watching. On with the show.
Also, I will say, I did yoga teacher training, and the body holds, you, I'm sure, know this, the body holds on to trauma and onto memory.
Right.
Doctors talk about this too, that you can have issues because of things that have happened to your hips, especially. But we talked about that in my yoga teacher training. And so the fact that that's it's so common across all of these different, ways of teaching, and yoga is athletic, and, a lot of people just do it to exercise, but it is also healing and grounding. Yes. And it helps you, obviously that mind body connection, but helps you ground in your body. But it also you can focus it to kind of open up those parts of your body that you hold trauma or wounds or that are connected. You can do specifically heart openers or hip stretches and stuff like that. And that was that was in some of the teaching that we did, was reading about the various purposes, both very literally, physically, this helps build to, you want to do this to build to this back bend, but also these are heart openers, and that's what that means.
Right. So the apple does not fall far from the tree. So I started getting interested in somatic work.
Yeah.
The idea that you just described perfectly. So thank you for sharing that. Now, I don't have to explain it. Our body, our memories from childhood, we don't know how to conceptualize what's happening to us. So we hold those memories as a physical entity in our body. So,
especially if you don't have a place to comfortably externalize them.
Exactly.
Process them.
Exactly. So this was profound in terms that work with Ken, for me, changed my life. I think he saved my life. He really helped me see and work with some really dark places in me that I was still struggling with.
Yeah.
And so when I finished the Brennan training program, I quickly signed up for another 4-year training program. You go for 4 weeks a year to another place, and did so. So I did 4 years of training in basically somatic and energy work, where we really understand how the body mind works and how it expands into our field. And then I went and did the core training, another 4 years. So I have 8 years of training at this point. And the core training was equally as, it wasn't magical, it was really intense though. Both of these programs were experiential.
Yeah.
So you go there and you go through therapeutic processes. Yeah. Every week you're there. It's profound. So I was in therapy a lot. I was doing work emotionally a lot during these 8 years. And I needed every hour of therapy that I did during those years. So having finished the core training program, I was really now getting people moving energy, and I was learning. One of the things I learned in finishing my work with Ken was that the training that we had learned was that you don't give advice. You don't share your personal process. You hold a certain boundary and you let somebody work things out. So Ken would do that. He would let me work things out, but I didn't really get I just kept doing therapy, getting in a relationship. It would blow up again. I'd come back and do more therapy thinking, okay, I got it now. And then I would go into a relationship with somebody very similar to the last person. I learned why I was doing that. I understood why I was choosing the same person. And then I started teaching that. So I became more of a teacher. I became a coach.
Mm-hmm.
I became a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I helped people begin to see their own process. And during this, I also continued studying. At some point, I decided I had individuals wanting to bring their partner in to do couples work with me. So then I started diving into couples training. So then now I mentor and coach couples, or actually relationships. I've done work with a lot of polyamory and stuff like this. So my training just continues.
Yeah.
And during this time, I am also deeply in my own study of what is the meaning of life? What is this container we're living in?
42.
Yeah.
As we all know.
Yes. The answer to the meaning of life
It's
is
42.
And I started to put all the pieces together that I had been studying all these years and came up with my own. And I don't want to say I came up with my own. I made choices out of all these things. And there were other people talking about this. It's not like I came up with the idea.
You pulled ideas from different places and kind of came up with what made sense to you from that and kind of had your own little Frankenstein of.
That's what I should call this. Frankenstein.
A classic tale about the folly of ego.
Yes.
When men try and create life without really thinking about what they're doing.
So, gosh, I could talk about that too. we might have to do another episode where we can talk about other stuff rather than me. Mm-hmm. That would be fun to do. Is there any questions you have about any of this so far?
Sorry, it's a lot of information, so I'm really trying to actively listen, but it means that the questions aren't coming as quickly.
Yeah.
So you did 4 years, Barbara Brennan, 4 years of core energetics, and you were having a private practice for 6 of those years, building that. So then did you quit your other job?
I did. And you were born around this time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, we took you, your mama and I took you to the Brennan School my second week of training. And on Thursday, Barbara does a school healing where she just does, I can't even begin to describe what happens. But she often goes to the front row or down the aisles and stops and works on somebody. And your mom and I were sitting with you, and she came up and she did this energy work on all of us. So she was really working on you and seeing your field and what you're going to have to go through in your life, which was a lot.
Yeah.
And that was pretty profound. So you had your first healing was by Barbara Brennan.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that. I think that's new information.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really, I mean, I was in tears during that too. All this really opened me up. It was pretty vulnerable for me to have to face myself in these new ways.
Yeah.
And
that shadow work it's a lot.
So I focus on a lot of that kind of work, the stuff that I learned. I bring everything that I've learned, including addiction and being a really bad boy, to being a corporate person. And people who come to see me who work in corporations can get a lot of help from me.
You have a lot of different perspectives that you can draw from personally. So it's easier to kind of understand and sympathize with a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing else I want to say, when I came back from CORE, my goal was to go back to school and get my MSW, Master's in Social Work.
But you didn't do that.
Well, I didn't because I was so busy
working.
There's no. I had a full practice that I couldn't. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I'd already.
And you didn't want to turn people away.
Yeah, I already spent tons of money getting these. Those were not cheap trainings. So I never did do that. So I don't do therapy. I do shamanic work, coaching, healing, mentoring,
counseling. Can you say that?
I don't really. I wouldn't call it counseling. I would call it teaching, mentoring, and coaching more than counseling.
I think like 10 years ago, you were calling it counseling.
Yeah, I think you were. I didn't know. When I look at what people have to do to become a counselor now, or what people have to do to become a therapist, those are
different.
Yeah, they're different. I'm not that. And I don't do all the same things. I'm not trained to do that.
Yeah.
So no, I don't use those words.
Okay.
And I don't use the word healer because it has way too much stuff attached to it.
Yeah.
I was hanging out with some friends about 8 years ago, and I started talking about consciousness. And I have this talk that I had come up with, that way to describe that I started teaching my clients, because I was starting to have an understanding of what the idea that the nature of reality is consciousness, that everything is made up of consciousness. Consciousness is fundamental and primary. And I had a way to describe it that was really helpful for people who wanted to understand this. And I told this to a friend of mine, Alex Kane. And he said, we have to record this. We need to record this. This is profound. And we didn't, because I felt self-conscious.
Now
I reached a point where I'm like, oh, he was right. So I, again, had all this change happening inside.
Yeah.
And I spent probably like 5 or 6 months deciding if I wanted to do this, and then another 9 months putting this together.
Yeah. Well, and you've had like a journey into accepting that like people view you as a teacher, and because you've done some teaching now.
Yeah.
Is it core that you taught at?
Yeah. I was assistant. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you've kind of like stepped through a couple of hoops and like into different roles and put on different hats and taken in what people are telling you that they see in you a little bit more, and you've gotten a little bit more comfortable, I think, in those 8 years, probably. So to the point where that conversation obviously still sits with you, and like you were still remembering it and calculating on it for those 8 years to get here to decide that this is how you wanted to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think in the last 10 years, I did another level of waking up and maturity.
Yeah.
So I felt ready.
Yeah.
I felt like I could stand up in front of people and I could be the person that I needed to be to really be authentic. And then I had that impulse. It's like, I can't not do this. So now I want to teach everything I've learned about communication and relationships, about what is love really, why do we choose the people we do in relationships, how do we learn to do a relationship well. I'm especially enjoying working with men in terms of how to be a man in the world, because that's a really difficult thing in today's world.
Yeah.
It's confusing.
Well, there's a lot of people trying to tell you what a real man is,
right,
and how to do that.
It's all stirred up and torn apart. We don't even know what it is anymore.
Yeah, it's also a place that people are really trying to make money.
Yeah.
It's that whole
manosphere
world of telling men how to be manly enough, and if you just do this and whatever, then. Yeah,
I'm more interested in helping men understand how they can ground in themselves and be authentic and be in their real power, rather than having to throw power around to pretend like they're masculine.
Rather than having to be over somebody else in order to feel powerful.
Yes. So working with personal work around understanding what we're made up of, understanding how to work with our shadow, work with these things. It's more like just having awareness.
Yeah.
Getting people to get up and claim these parts of themselves, to reintegrate them. And And then working with what is the meaning of life, which I think is incredibly important.
What do you think the meaning of life is?
Well, 42.
Obviously.
But, you know, I if I had to put it in a nutshell, I would say that we are consciousness waking up to itself.
So the point of life is, the meaning of life is to wake up.
Yeah.
The journey to.
Yeah. And we're going to have long conversations about that here. So I think this is a good place to stop. I'm so grateful that you were willing to do this. It's such a treat. And maybe we can do a different conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope this was helpful in answering the question, who the heck is this guy? And remember, be good to you.
Yeah.
Of course. The Crack Between the Worlds is conceived and hosted by Mark Wald. Produced, engineered, and edited by Lloyd Lemmerman. Music composed by Kindly. A Turning on the Lights production. For updates, visit Crack Between the Worlds and our Instagram @The Crack Between the Worlds.